Welcome, I'm Pat Croce, and this is the American Cancer Society's HEALED Community Gathering. HEAL, health and energy through active living every day. And I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, 6ABC, our leadership partners, and all of you who've donated and contributed to our HEALED mission. And this is our movement. We want to get everyone moving in the same direction, with a smile across their face. And you're going to smile today with my two great guests. But before we get started, I always like a moment of stillness. And I have this little Tibetan bell that I ring. And all I ask you to do is place your attention on the sound of this bell. And what that does magically is take all of your monkey mind, thinking and dreaming and sensing and perceiving, and bring it down to this fine moment, just now, right now. We leave the past outside the door of this HEALED gathering, and we come in for the next hour and share the common space of aware presence, all together, all of us together, supporting each other, whether you've been touched by cancer or touched by someone who's been touched by cancer. That's what we're all about, is a community that wants to encourage, inspire, educate, inform, and entertain along the way. So hopefully within the next hour, you will get a ping, something that will make you say, ah, or aha. So I just got a little buzz because I'm in the Smoky Mountains right now. So if I freeze, my guests are going to continue going on with this hour of power, and Diana from the ACS will take over for me, but I'm in the side of a mountain in the Smoky Mountains, and it's working so far. So I want to introduce to you our first guest today. You're going to love both our guests. You're not going to be able to sit still because neither one of these two can. My first guest is Kimberly Reed. Kimberly is a thought provoker. She has degrees from Westchester University and a master's in education from Temple University. She's a leader, a seasoned leader in transforming organizations in high-performing enterprises. She's an author. We'll talk about her book. She has awards, and I have pages of awards for her. The 2018 Woman of Excellence Game Changer Award for South Jersey Magazine. She received the prestigious 2020 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Salute to Greatness Award. She was one of the top 28 Black leaders for their impact on diversity and inclusion in Color magazine. Now, this woman, it's difficult to define because, in short, she's a rare inspiration of a caregiver for someone who's had cancer, a survivor of cancer herself, and a thriver in any community she touches, whether it's her neighborhood, her church, business communities, a speaker at Wharton, at Howard University. She knows all about health equity and diversity, and she's just a pure leader in the realm of leadership. So please welcome Kim Reed.
Hello, Pat. How are you doing? Hello, all of the ACS HEALED viewers. How is everyone, and how are you, sir?
I'm great, Kim, and you look pretty in pink, I got to tell you.
Thank you. So this pink represents a couple of things. One, breast cancer survivor that you mentioned, yeah. And pink and green are the colors of my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated.
Is that a wonderful presentation? I love it. So tell me, I've never heard of a chief transformational officer. That a CTO. What exactly is that?
Well, I will tell you, a CTO is that, let me put it this way. Simplicity is always best. I'm going into my 14th year of being an entrepreneur. I spent my time in corporate America. I had the blessing, Pat, to work for some of the most influential companies in iconic brands in the world. And when I started my own firm 14 years ago, almost, I called it Reed Consulting Group. And I thought about our brand after a year and the work that we do in diversity, equality, and inclusion. And I said, you know what? We do not just go into companies, come out, right? We are a part of the fabric. We want to instill DEI into the DNA of an organization, right? So we become a part of the fabric. And what the result is we develop a mindset. We develop a culture in collaboration with our clients. So I changed our name to Reed Development Group. And what people kept telling me as feedback, which was a blessing, that I transform thinking when I'm speaking and transform thinking when I am training and DEI and when I'm working with my clients. So I said, you know what? Since Reed Development Group is my company, I'm going to call myself the Chief Diversity Officer. So that's the story.
So tell us, and I love that story, Kim, tell us, how do you transform people's minds? Because many times they're conditioned and they're so culturally set in concrete that it's hard for them to think outside the box or to think there's another better way. Yeah.
And, it's funny because I am an unapologetic optimist. And I'll tell you why I say that a little bit later. But I want to answer your question this way, Pat, if I could. There is a level of optimism that we have lost, right? And here's why I believe that. At the beginning of a global pandemic, we were told that we were on lockdown, right? You heard that word.
Oh, yeah.
How many times, Pat? Lockdown. And you began to use that word at times, right? Perhaps, or people did, right? And so when our mindset was programmed to being at home is not being safe and productive, or being safe and spending more time with the people we love, or spending more time with perhaps reorganizing like I did my office, or just building your personal development and getting some good books, or whatever the case may be to enrich your growth, we were programmed that lockdown was a negative. And for a year and a half, Pat, when you have that level of negativity constantly, and don't get me wrong, this is not a negative to our journalists and great reporters and media, because they had to keep us informed. But I just wanted us to use different language at that time, right? Because I know how sensitive our minds can be. Anyone can learn to be more optimistic, right? But one method in doing so is staying mindful of your purpose. What was our purpose? Being safe, was being in our home or wherever we live, right? Always have a purpose, intent, or goal for every action that we take. Even if that action is as small as, say, getting up in the morning and saying an affirmation. That's why I love your bell. Oh my God, when you did the bell, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to fall asleep. I can't, because I was just getting into this space of peace, right? And that's very hard to do when you have this habit of language. That's powerful. What we say to ourselves is so powerful. And people who live with purpose and intention feel more fulfilled, quite honestly, because every action becomes a success, at least a vast majority of the time, right? And then with that much winning going on, you know this from basketball, right? It's a lot easier to see setbacks as temporary and successes as our new normal. So we have to make an effort to think about every action we take, Pat, and have a positive intent behind it. We have to get in the habit of celebrating each success. I am not saying optimism or being positive or having this big bowl of sugar, because there are people that are suffering and that are small businesses that are trying to recover. But we have to get into the habit of enjoying getting things accomplished and coming into this remade nation and revitalizing who we all are, and realize that the setbacks are fewer and really then they're lessons, powerful lessons that we had to learn as a nation and as a people.
Kim, amen. Amen. And what I see your teachings are that many people think that their to-do list is a means to an end. The means is the end. Each and every one of your action steps, as you're saying, be positive, be optimistic, and put your full self into every item, whether you're making a telephone call, being a caregiver, feeding your spouse something that they need for nourishment and healing or their meds, but it's taking every action, putting an intention, a motivation behind it, and pushing it forward with a positive attitude. Not a Pollyannish, not
right.
but really, really feeling from deep down in your heart that this is what I want to do and this will work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, is this what your book, Optimist Always Wins, is about?
Yes and no. So yes, but no. So I'll answer it. Yes, it is. I'm excited that you even said that. You see how I lit up even more. I wrote this book because of a journey that I had. It's birthed from a journey that I had when my mother died 8 years ago of leukemia. And she was in the hospital for 45 days and before she passed away. And I will tell you, Pat, that journey taught me so much about me and the power of optimism, healing, God's faith, our fear. And there are some discouragement eliminators that I discovered when I was able to turn the corner to see the sun because I hit life's rock bottom.
Wait a second. Hold on. This is discouragement eliminators. I want to hear more on this, please.
So one of the discouragement eliminators, Pat, is having faith by the speed of light. In this discouragement eliminator, i.e. chapter, I talk about how our faith is the power of our faith. And in the midst of life's darkest moment, gratitude is the rocket fuel to our resilience. And I say that in this chapter, and I describe how we can have faith, we can recover, and we can renew in the spirit of faith, because there's a choice, faith or fear. And I was fearful in the beginning. I'm with all transparency, I was fearful that I couldn't live without my mother. She didn't equip me not to live without her. God didn't show her show me those examples as she went through her 45 days of transition in her cancer journey to leave me. And I learned the power of optimism. Being optimistic isn't simply looking at the world out of these rose-colored glasses. Because when you are walking in the dark, it doesn't matter what color your glasses are. If anything, crisis events such as our caring for ourselves when we're walking through cancer, or our beloved family and loved ones, it reminds us that life is not always a bowl of cherries. And faith by that speed of light, it's a powerful revelation. And in the book, I talk about 10 discouragement eliminators that had power for my healing. And the book is available where all books are sold. And this is not selling the book. It is making a point that every book sold are going to 2 charities. All the proceeds are going to one. It's going to ACS, if you know the Philadelphia Hope Lodge. We hope it's reopening in August. They've had a tough year, like many nonprofits. And so my hope is that for the life of the book, a portion of any of the book sales will help them continue to thrive and help so many. And the other portion is going to a healthcare institution right here in our city, and for breast cancer research and patient care. So I am so excited that optimists always win, who can do that for people, because Pat, I was so blessed to have an amazing mother, to have wonderful parents, to have wonderful support system and people as I walked through my own journey shortly thereafter my mother passed and my maternal grandmother passed. So I have so much to be grateful for, and I wanted to show people that they can too in my book.
Okay, well, I still need a couple more discouragement eliminators, because I just love the term. And no, we will push optimists always win. But I love the idea that, listen, your mother had leukemia. You had breast cancer. Your grandmother died prior to that. What does it take for someone else who was listening right now, who is a caregiver or themselves been touched by cancer, besides the faith? Yeah. What else besides the light within?
One of the other discouragement eliminators, I'm glad that you like that, is keep away from kryptonite. Kryptonite, right? Remember Superman?
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh. And what was kryptonite to him?
That was his weakness.
That's right. And a lot of people assume that you only talk about people being your kryptonite, other people, right? Negative, toxic people. It's us sometimes. And so when people who are walking through this, I will tell you, Pat, I have to, with all transparency again, because I'm going to be 100% real about this. I knew nothing about what I'm talking about as I was going through. I had a very tough time walking through my mother's death, walking through her being sick, my Shiro, and then subsequently me being sick. But I knew by that time, right, that I had to pivot my thinking. In kryptonite, our weakness goes back to our mindset. Mm. And it goes back to understanding how you are constructing a stronger and stronger you, right? And because our kryptonite, it could be the situations, it could be the challenges that we face, and it keeps you stuck in this negative mindset, right? And so not only keeping the company you keep around you, right? Because you got to have positive people like ACS HEALED, these shows to show people that you can win and live. I'm 8 years cancer-free, Pat. And I am so appreciative to God. My lifespan was 4 years. It is 8.
Oh.
And I'm doing great. And I will continue to do great. My doctors are like, wow. My Dr. Mincer and Dr. Saddleoff at Penn Medicine. Oh my God, they're like, wow. They said, you know what? And now it's probably most likely gone forever because I've surpassed some markers. So you have to keep note of, surrounding yourself. I can't stress that enough, with what you read, who you talk to about what you're walking through. Because Pat, I will tell you, there were some people that looked at me with this tail of woe look on their face when I told them what I was going through. And that's normally, people are very compassionate, Pat, I get that. But people also were like, oh, you're gonna die. You're gonna, when you go through chemotherapy, you're gonna lose all your hair and you're not gonna be able to speak. Pat, after my first chemotherapy session round, 2 weeks later, I had to speak on a stage in Vegas, Las Vegas, 400 people, 500 women. And I did it. Everybody's walk is different, don't get me wrong. And I have hair again, right? And it's all good. You know, you buy some, you put some on, whatever. While you're going through it, it's just hair, right? But it's how you look at life and how you surround yourself with like-minded people who want to support and encourage you. And you have to do your part too by encouraging others. That's why I love every opportunity like this, Pat, to be able to share with others that you can too walk through this. But it's going to be important that you take some very important steps It's going to require you to pivot your mindset and your spirit to win.
So I love this term you use, kryptonite, for, I'm taking it as the metaphor for the voice in your head, that negative voice in your head that tells you what you can't do, or what it brings you into the past or projects you into the future and takes you out of the present moment. But I love that term, kryptonite. It can also be those that you surround yourself with, anything that pulls you down, correct?
Yes, Pat. You nailed it.
So who pulls you up? How did you manipulate your mindset to allow that voice in the head to disappear? Get out of here.
So optimist, which I remember I told you earlier, I call myself an unapologetic optimist, right? Because even through the challenges and in my darkest moments, and when I hit life's rock bottom, I still was able to see a little bit of sun. I'll tell you.
You could.
Yes, I'm going to tell you how.
Tell me how.
Optimists don't ignore life stresses. We don't. I don't want you all to think that I did. But I accept hardships. I accept that hardships will and do occur in life because of whom I believe in, right? God teaches us that. The habit to get into not letting hardships, when they occur, Pat, consume the entirety of your thinking. Instead, use the hardship to fuel other reactions and other intentions. We have to learn from the hardship, the challenge, the rock bottom. Understand it's going to make you feel like the end of the world. But then you move on to the next goal of finding a way to build off the hardship. I know that this is tough advice to heed, Pat. I know that. After a full year we've just had of hardship, but you have to remember a hardship like COVID, and I'm not comparing COVID to cancer, I would never do that. But COVID or cancer, for most, and we pray that it only comes in one lifetime. Your goal has to be able to move from your kryptonite, your thinking, people, habits, the pessimistic feelings. It instilled in you through these challenges, and start building a pattern of manifesting positive successes.
You know, Kim, they have an ancient Tibetan saying, Thich Nhat Hanh, the famous Buddhist monk who's still alive.
Yes.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. nominated Thich Nhat Hanh for a Nobel Peace Prize after the Vietnam War. But he has a book, and you'll love this.
Okay.
No mud, no lotus. The beautiful lotus flower doesn't grow in anything but mud. So those hardships you're talking about allow us to blossom, evolve, awaken, grow stronger and better. And it's exactly what you're saying. But most people think that it has to grow in sunny weather. No. Suffering will cause us to become stronger if, as you're saying, embrace it. Don't recess it or suppress it.
No.
Embrace it.
That's right. That's Pat, you're so right. I will say this. Anyone can learn to become more optimistic. We know that, right? Because it's staying mindful in your purpose, right? Your purpose could be the challenge, right? I unequivocally believe that my mother's journey was for me and countless others. Why? Because I learned about faith, the power of faith. I learned about the power of God answering my mother's prayer and not answering mine. My mom asked God to take away the pneumonia. That's the hospital pneumonia. That's she contracted that the last few days of her life. And when she told me one night I was leaving, Kim, honey, I just wish that God would just take this hospital pneumonia away from me. And I said, Mommy, me too. But she didn't know also my prayer was her to live, right? God didn't answer my prayer. He answered hers.
Well, you know what I like to say, Kim, that you're a prime example, a perfect example of experience. It's one thing to talk words, but to show from your experience. And I'm a big preacher of the divine universe unfolds before us, for us, not to us, but for us. Not necessarily what we want, but exactly what we need.
Yeah. No.
And you're that example. You're saying it precisely. Your mother's answer may not have been what you wanted, but it's exactly what made you who you are right now, to share the message, to show people how you can live with cancer, with injury, with illness, and still have a positive outlook on life.
I hope so, Pat, because the good news is, to your point, you make superb points. And by practicing several of what we've talked, several techniques like that we've kind of talked about, we can make the transition to go, to go a little more smoothly for us when we walk through our seasons. And so, we have to keep our vibes positive, and we have to be deliberate in adopting a optimistic attitude. And by doing both, Pat, we will have the drive and the impetus to author our next chapters, no matter how we are feeling after a year or after years or after months of challenge and trauma.
You can see why Kim is vice chairwoman, I should say, of the American Cancer Society in the South Jersey section. She should be vice chairman of the United States of America.
No, my sorority sister is. She's doing a great job.
Oh, that's wonderful. I didn't know she was from the same sorority.
Oh, yes, absolutely, Pat. Absolutely.
Well, listen, the author of Optimists Always Win. Don't go far. We're going to bring our next guest on and then bring you back for Q&A.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear our next guest. She's awesome.
Well, the two of you, wow. A 1-2 punch. Thank you, Kim.
Okay.
Our next guest you will enjoy as well. Karen Moon. Karen is a friend of mine who is a psychologist, and she's worked with, she's called in for grief therapy for Columbine, the Columbine shooting, the Oklahoma City bombing, after 9/11. She's had 20 some years of experience with counseling, and she's a good friend of mine, and I've recommended people to Karen Moon because not only does she know the talk, she walks the talk, not only of a clinical psychologist, but also of a spiritual teacher. So she can combine this in a way that is so engaging. She uses experience as a tool, just like you heard Kim do. I love when people walk the talk. So please welcome Karen Moon.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Pat. So happy to be here. Thank you for the introduction. I don't know, Kimberly, this is a hard act to follow. So my specialty in my psychotherapy practice is grief and loss, which sounds like it would be the absolute opposite of optimism. But I think Pat, being the brilliant person that he is, brought the two of us together because grief is optimistic, because what grief is love. And I'm not just talking about grief and loss to death. It's grief and loss to divorce, a relationship, your body changing, life transition. Working with my clients who are struggling with grief, or living with grief, I should say. They're my greatest teachers. People will say to me, how do you do that all day? How do you sit with people all day who are suffering? Not everyone chooses to suffer. And being in grief does not necessarily mean you're suffering. It means it's difficult, it's hard, but people who embrace it and awaken to it and live with it don't suffer as much.
Stop right there. Karen, okay. Wait. That's really good. Because first you said that grief is a manifestation of love, rooted in love. Second, you said that grief is not necessarily suffering if you embrace it. Give us some of the tools that you would share with your patients or people who ask you, how do I deal with this?
You deal with it, first of all. I think, we live in a culture and a society that does not embrace negativity or suffering. We have a pill, a therapy, a type of wine, lots of shops to shop, anything to get us away from our suffering or our pain. If you watch any commercial, it's all about getting rid of pain. And what I'm sure all of you have experienced because you've been touched by cancer is that you can't escape the pain. And the easiest way through pain is through the pain. So I always think of grief as like this, and you can't go over it and you can't go under it. You have to go through it. But there are many ways to not go through it. And there are many ways that we can just shove it down, whether it be we've lost a loved one, or our body has changed, or our body is changing. We can shove it aside and go forward. But what happens, whether it's a month later or years later, that grief or that unlooked at feelings comes back and hits us in the face. So this is my office that you're all with me right now. I invite people in to be with their grief and with their pain in a I think the goal to not suffer.
So how do you invite them? Like, what does this invitation entail?
To first of all, to build trust and to be able to then share the true feelings. We all have, with our minds, very sophisticated ways to avoid things and not open up ourselves to them. So what I hope to do is create a space for people to really be able to look at the pain and not be afraid. I often use this analogy of, if you remember the fable of the boy in Holland who kept his finger in the dike so that he could save his country from flooding. I think many of us walk around flooded, and we're so afraid if I allow myself to feel or really acknowledge the pain that I'm walking with, it's like taking our finger out of the dike and we're going to flood. So what I really try to do is help people feel comfortable that we can take that finger out and they're not going to flood. And paradoxically, eventually they're going to feel better because they're going to feel lighter.
So how hard is it, especially for men, to be vulnerable enough to take their finger out of the dike?
It's very hard, and it can take a very long time. And sometimes I'll be with clients and they'll walk out every week and I'm like, I don't think I'm making any impact. And then it's a month or two later, or 6 months later, or a year later, that finally there's been enough kind of foundation built that they feel comfortable that they can share and open. And it's kind of like running. When you get that runner's high, like the first few weeks that you're running, it's painful and it's annoying and you don't want to do it. But then you get that runner's high and you just want to keep doing it. Meditating is like that as well. I also think really acknowledging and sharing your feelings can be that way too. Once you start getting positive reinforcement that, okay, these feelings aren't so scary, and that actually there's healing if I pay attention to them.
And so how can people, our community right now, who may not have access to you, Karen, as a therapist, but they're mentally suffering from grief, loss of a loved one, or their loved one is ill, fatally ill, what can they do, or who can they look toward to help them heal?
So I'm glad you brought that up, Pat, because I think often when I talk, people think they have to come to therapy to do that. And that's not true. I'm going to read something that came across my email that I think really embodies what this group is about, and it answers your question. It's a meditation by a spiritual leader. His name is Henry Nouwen, and it's called Compassionate Solidarity. When we think about the people who have given us hope and have increased the strength of our soul, we might discover they were not advice givers, warners, or moralists, but the few who were able to articulate in words and actions the human condition in which we participate, and who encouraged us to face the realities of life. Those who do not run away from our pains, but touch them with compassion, bring healing and new strength. The paradox indeed is that the beginning of healing is in the solidarity with the pain. In our solution-oriented society, it is more important than ever to realize that wanting to alleviate pain without sharing it is like wanting to save a child from a burning house without the risk of being hurt. It is in the solitude that this compassionate solidarity takes its shape. So answering that question is finding people who are, what was Kimberly's? Not discouragement.
Discouragement interrupters.
Right, who are not discouragement interrupters, and who are courageous, who will bear witness to our pain, who will be with us. So those friends, family, support groups, even ourselves, who have the courage to be with us in our pain and not try to write it away or find a solution, but help us sit with it.
By listening.
By listening. There's a grief therapist in Colorado. His name's Alan Wolford, and he began this movement called compassionate grieving, and walking alongside people who are grieving, not leading them and not pulling them back, but walking alongside. Grieving is a basic human condition that none of us can get away from. Like taxes and death, grief is also something that we are guaranteed to experience in life. And because it's a measurement of love, the more we love, the more we will grieve. But grief is not a bad word or a dirty word. It is an experience that we go through. And like Kimberly said, it's an adversity that we learn from and we can grow from. But if we ignore it or push it away, it just gets toxic inside of us, and we certainly don't grow. And it can be unhealing.
You know, Karen, your advice is so relevant. Just several weeks ago, you know this, a dear friend of mine, Andy Stern, who's one of our leadership partners and is the one who recommended to me that I have this gathering, have a Sangha for all cancer survivors, caregivers, and loved ones. It was his idea, and he died. And, you know, it hit me hard, and I cried like a baby. Now, 6 years ago, I would never have shown that. I would never have been that vulnerable. I would never have been that open. And it would have just tore me apart inside, as opposed to embracing it, like you said, and going right through that feeling of grief and just embracing it wholeheartedly. I got it in a bear hug so much that I was all cried out. I was all cried out. Now, I would never, I'm telling you, a decade ago, or those who know me with the Sixers, I would never be seen crying. I'm the guy with the leather jacket, zippered all the way. You're not going to see that hole in me. But that's why your advice to all of us who have any tangential association with cancer, to really be able to embrace the grief, cry it out, hug it out, laugh, do whatever's possible, walk alongside. I love that analogy. Walk alongside your loved one. And I know you don't repress grief. You don't take people's emotions away, but you provide tools. Are there tools that you can share with us right now that would help those of us who are grieving?
Yes, I think, so as you were talking, what was coming to me is fear. And I think fear is one of the most toxic emotions for grief and for pain. And oftentimes we are so fearful of what we are really feeling that we suppress it. And other people feel the fear too. And I think when it comes to grief, and I'm sure all of you have experienced this with people in your life, that there are people who are not afraid and will embrace you and will be okay with Pat Croce crying, and others who are so fearful of that, they'll turn away. You're in the grocery store and everybody in your community knows that your husband has cancer, but a couple people in the grocery store will look the other way because they don't know what to say. And it's not because they're rude or mean, it's that they're afraid. And they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. And they're afraid of paying attention to the reality of what's happening. So I think to notice your own fear and to notice the fear of others is one thing. But in terms of tools, it's really being, I think, real with what you're feeling. Oftentimes, and we talk about this all the time in our Sangha, is the monkey mind and all the thoughts. We are intelligent human beings, and we use thinking a lot, and we sometimes overuse it to avoid our heart. How many of you have experienced feeling something really painful in your heart, like grief or loss or extreme anxiety and fear, and it is so scary, we go into our heads and we go into story, and then we go down the rabbit hole of worrying, or the rabbit hole of figuring out things and feeling sad, or trying to like negotiate with the feeling. And what all that does is distract us from the real feelings. So I think my biggest tool that I say to people is to feel the feelings. Feelings are meant to be felt. And oftentimes we are in a habit that we completely bypass the feeling and we go right into our head. So if you're one of those people who thinks a lot and is up at 3:30 in the morning thinking, pause, put your hand on your heart and say, what am I feeling right now? Okay, I'm feeling anxious. It's not that I'm really worried about my child flying to California. It's really, I'm feeling anxious, and I don't need to think through all the different scenarios of what could happen or could not happen. And instead, I'm just going to pay attention to the real feeling. Feelings, like I said, are meant to be felt. And when we feel them, they start to dissipate. The other vision I have with that is, if you all can come up with this vision, you're sitting in a room and the door is closed and you just want to be quiet. And this annoying child keeps banging on the door saying, I want to play with you. I want to play with you. That annoying child is that painful feeling. And you're like, no. But then we say, okay, you open the door and you let that annoying child in, which is representative of a very painful feeling. And you say, all right, I'm going to pay attention to you. I'm going to play with you for a while. And after you play with that child for 3 minutes, they get bored and leave. And it's the same thing with the really scary feeling. If you pay attention to it, it will start to evaporate. But if you don't, it gets bigger and bigger and knocks louder.
I love that analogy. I love it. And what you're saying is to face off with it, embrace it. And what you're saying subtly is be in the now. Don't project to the future and worry. Don't pull into the past in comparison. Really, you're telling people to be in the now and feel that feeling, which is meant to be felt now, because it takes you out of your head. And the quickest way you, as a therapist, can take your patients and all of us who are grieving out of our head is to bring us to our heart.
Yeah.
I love this too. I love that whole hand on the heart exercise. Is there another exercise you have before I open it up to Q&A?
Well, so I'm going to go back to that other question of like, do you need to go to a therapist? So the greatest gift that I think I give my clients is a safe space to share their story and and not just the story in their head, but the feelings in their heart. And if you can do that. And so obviously I'm a therapist. I believe that it's important to get feelings out and to feel the feelings. That can be done with a trusted friend who doesn't try to fix you or dismiss you. That can be done with journaling. Journaling is a beautiful tool to get things out of your heart and get the perspective, because oftentimes I have a client who's on the couch across from me. I ask a question. They bring the story out. I poke and prod and ask questions about the feeling that goes along with the story. And it lays there naked. And they look at it. And I don't even say something brilliant. And they'll say, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. And the story then shifts its perspective and goes back in a little lighter. And that's the point, for us to lighten ourselves a bit. And that can be done with journaling too. How many times, I'm sure, Pat, you've experienced this, that you start writing something and you look at it and say, wait a minute, this isn't right. Or maybe there's another way to look at this, because we get perspective because it gets out of us.
So just in review, Karen, journaling. I'm a journaler. You know that. Every morning at 4, I journal. I'm an avid journaler. And some of these notes I'm putting down now will go into my journal tomorrow. Find a trusted friend, a loved one who loves you no matter how hard you grieve, or no matter how much pain you're in, or no matter how much you bug them. Yeah. Have someone that will listen to you. What was the other one? There was something else you said.
And then feeling like you attending to what your feelings are, like holding your heart, and know that you can rely on journaling, on friends, a therapist, but the person who is always, always with you is you. So to know yourself and to not be afraid of yourself, or to face the fear of being with your own feelings.
That's great. Face the fear. So stay there, Karen, because I want to bring Kim Reed back on. Kim?
Hi, I'm back. Oh, wow. What a wonderful conversation. Pat, can I just make a quick point? So something you said is so
Please.
powerful. One of the things that we have to do and try our best, because Karen, is you cannot deny, you have to try your best not to deny grieving. That was my biggest regret. Pat, when you said that, you know, people know you, right? They know you from the Sixers and they see you with the leather jacket. Hey, you know, when they lose, you woo! You know, it's all, and when they win, it's, you know, but you have to, one of the biggest regrets that I have, I did not grieve. And when it was time for me my body to say grieve, that's when I hit rock bottom, because I suppressed all of my crying, all of the pain, because I felt that I had to be this superwoman for everyone in my life and for myself going through my own fight, right? But that was the wrong thing to do. So if I could say anything to people, grieve. Go through the process. Karen, I'm sure you agree with that, Dr. Moon. Go through the process, because if you suppress it, it wreaks havoc on your spirit, your mind, and your soul. No question about it.
And Kimberly, thank you. I totally agree with that. And I think, you know, the other thing I would say is to be non-judgmental about how you're grieving or how you're feeling and everyone around you, and to be aware and know yourself.
Yes.
Because oftentimes too, when you're in the middle of the fight, when you're taking care of your mother day in and day out, you may have to suppress some of that to be that person to take care of her. And that's okay. And I've often had people say, well, I don't understand why I'm not feeling sad right now. You may not be able to feel sad right now, and that's just how you're reacting, but be aware and okay when it does come. And that's where the awareness comes in, is just where you're not denying, but you're being aware when it does come.
Yeah, for sure.
I have found that a lot with this pandemic. I am busier now than I was throughout the whole pandemic, which was so difficult for so many people. And yet we were in it. So we didn't quite allow ourselves to feel it because we had to get through it. There was a little bit of that finger in the dike stuff. Now life is better. Happy days are here again. And people are like, wait, why am I feeling so sad and anxious? Because we have a little post-traumatic stress from what we went through. And now we're finally feeling what we went through last year. So I think when you're in the middle of the fight, sometimes you can't feel it completely. And so to give yourself the permission when the fight ends, it may all come out.
No question. No question. And, you know, I tell you another way to feel, because I love the journaling. And Pat, I love that I didn't know that. I love that you get up at 4 and you journal and that's such a great release. I do it as well. I started doing it, actually, let me correct, during the pandemic, just to keep my mind flowing, right? Because we were limited at some point. I want to, you asked Pat about another exercise, and Dr. Moon, if you don't mind, I like to ask all of us, including the 3 of us, I want you to think about the worst year of your life. What was it? Just think about it for one moment or a few. What was the worst year of your life? Pat?
I'm not a good one to ask right now, Kim, because I believe that my past has served my purpose perfectly to be where I am right now with you. So if you asked me that 6 or 7 years ago, I would have came up with some crazy answer.
Of course. Of course. So stay with that for a moment, Dr. Moon.
I kind of bristled when you said year, because I can say that I've had months maybe or weeks. But I think I've been blessed that I can't say that I've had a full year of bad.
Yes. You know why I asked that question? Remember, Pat, we talked about lockdown earlier, that mindset. We have been programmed, the majority of us have been programmed that 2020 was our worst year. 2020 was not my worst year. I guarantee many of the folks that are listening to us, 2020 may not have been their worst year either. But we are programmed through our kryptonite, right? Our faith has been tested. fear has shown up in our lives. Everything that you talk to people about, Dr. Moon, and Pat, that you also have know people who've experienced. But I want people to think about, how can the sun shine in your soul again? And that's to express gratitude and recognize what the real challenge for us is. It may sound real trite. I know it can. But even when you're experiencing very difficult times, it's usually possible to find just one thing that we could be grateful for. Or the gratitude for me came from the love of my mom, right? Mm-hmm. And getting to experience that type of beautiful and unconditional love, and watching her examples of courage, unyielding faith that I needed for myself a few months later, and the love that I know that when I get married one day and all of these things, yep, Pat, yep. Keep in mind. Any referrals? No, I'm kidding. But I think that but I know how to love, because I saw the example of loving yourself first. So there, so it goes to all of these moments in our lives to acknowledge out after the challenge, because sometimes that's unrealistic to do it in the challenge, is our gratitude and from the stress and the challenge, and shift our thinking and deepen our faith and joy.
Kim, you like the way I started this gathering with the ringing of the bell, that moment of stillness. You're going to love, based on everything you just said, the prayer that we share at the very end.
Yes, because I know.
It's a prayer of gratitude. It's not a petitionary prayer. We're not asking God for anything. So you will love the one sentence that we share together. Now, I am very selfish. I've had you two for 50 some minutes now, but I got to open you up, because I know there's people who want to ask you questions. So Diana, please come on.
Hi, Pat. We do have a couple of questions for each guest.
Nice.
Kim, we're going to start with you. Okay. You talk about your kryptonite during your cancer journey. What was your biggest kryptonite, and how did you move away from it?
Was people, and people who were telling me about the stories of people and their families, cousins, brothers, sisters that died from cancer, or that had a tough time with chemotherapy. I know someone told me that, Kim, you're not going to be able to eat for the whole 5 months you're on chemotherapy. Really? I can be humorous now, because I was like, woo, I was going to lose some weight, but no, that was not, that did not happen to me. So kryptonite, the weakness was when you're in the unknown. When you first get diagnosed, you're in the unknown, right? Because you talk to friends who went through it. I saw my mother who went through it, but it hits differently when you go through it. And so when people were telling me all that, I'm like, oh, maybe I will. Maybe I will die. Oh, Lord, I do want a child. I want to get married. I want this. I want that. I want this in my life. I'm not going to have any of those things now. No, I'm going to have those things and more. Right?
Beautiful.
So,
Beautiful.
Awesome. Okay, and Karen, I have one for you. What is the one piece of advice you have for someone dealing with grief and loss to help them walk alongside of their grief instead of trying to push their grief down in a way?
It's being aware. And I think, that's difficult sometimes to be aware if you've been conditioned to push away negative feelings. And I think that one of the best tools to becoming aware of your feelings is through meditation. Meditation, even 10 minutes a day, helps us create a space between ourselves and what we're thinking and feeling. I don't know really how meditation works, but it does. There's a cumulative effect that if you do it for a few weeks on a daily basis, there's a sense of calm and a breath that happens when a thought comes of like, I'm not going to be living this time next year. And to then the feeling, and to be able to say, okay, that is just a thought, and this is my feeling. It's not all in me. And we become aware of it, as opposed to when we're unaware, we just get assaulted with the reactions that we have. But a meditative process helps us to respond and understand our emotions, and to keep them over here and not in us.
Karen, can I
Does that
add
make sense?
something? Diane, I'd like to add to that.
Sure.
Because 7 years ago, and Kim, you'll love this, is when I started meditating. And there's a great app that I started with called Headspace. So go to Headspace. This Andy Puddicombe was a former Buddhist monk. He's a British accent. Beautiful. I watched a TED Talk on him, and I got attracted to this guy who was juggling for 10 minutes. And that's what he said, Karen, exactly what you said. Just 10 minutes of meditation. And the goal of meditation is there's no goal.
Right.
You just sit there, and what comes, you let go. And so I would recommend all who are listening who haven't tried meditation, or to answer your question, Diane, as Karen just said, is if they can start and it's not, you don't have to listen to Tibetan bells and smell incense and sit lotus style. You can just be walking in the woods. You're sitting by the water. It can be anywhere. But I think that's wonderful advice, Karen.
Oh, no question. And you know what, too, for all of my cancer survivors that are listening to us, and that maybe that you have another bout with cancer, because we don't talk about the reoccurrence, and it happens to people. The power of your rear view. That's another discouragement eliminator in the book. The power of your rear view. Think about what it took for you to survive the last time. Or what fortitude, what the people around you, what did it take for you to win? We have to sometimes look and peek into our past to understand that we can make it for the future.
Using the future, using the past, not allowing the past to lose you.
That's right. That's right, Pat. No question. No question at all. No question at all. I just want you to peek.
Yep.
I want you to peek. That's going to help you, right? Because even, people with cancer, I'm not talking about grief, because that's a whole nother, we don't have enough time for that type of power of the rear view. But when you're talking about our cancer survivors who are going through this one more time, it's hard for them to see past the crisis, right? Because but I want you to know that there is confidence, there is strength in you. You're going to pull through it again. We just have to tap into what worked for us in our rear view mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Diane, one more question, and then we'll have to put it to a close.
I do have one more question for Karen. You talked about how, a lot of the supporters and friends and family of someone going through grief don't want to see them in pain. So what advice do you have for someone to help educate their loved ones about how they do need to go through this and it's okay?
Well, yeah, it's funny you ask that, because I often say to people, unfortunately, you are in the position of teacher, because people don't know how to respond. And so oftentimes they don't respond at all. So you do need to teach. I don't need advice or solution. I just need you to sit with me. Barbara Kingsolver, who's an author, said a very beautiful quote: "The friend who says the wrong thing is made of dearer stuff than the friend who says nothing at all." So you give your friends and family permission to say the wrong thing, and then not correct them, but guide them and teach them what you need, which is really just presence. And that's so hard. It sounds so easy, and yet it's so hard for so many people. So that would be my best advice with that.
And the beauty of that, Karen, and that presence, that aware presence, when we rang the bell and shared this hour together, that presence is the one God within each of us. There's many expressions, 8 billion of them, right? But that one essence of God within us, that's the power of presence. Sharing that so that person in grief or suffering just feels that familiar, comfortable feeling of God.
Yeah. Yes.
At that point, I want to thank Karen Moon, a psychologist who I love, and now Kim Reed, a author, motivator, lead creator, a vice chairman of ACS, and author of Optimists Always Win, my new love. She's my new love, my pretty in pink. Now, together, here's my prayer, Kim. You're going to like this. I like to end this community gathering on, it's a one sentence. Thank you for the grace in helping me welcome what is happening right now.
Amen.
I'll repeat it again. Thank you for the grace, because grace is required to help me welcome what is happening right now. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Diana. Thank you all for joining us. And we'll see you next week. Same time, same place.
Bye.
Peace.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.